Well, hello and welcome to the latest episode, the latest edition of Tim Scott Uncancelled with me, Tim Scott, and you're very welcome. Great to have you with us, whoever you are, wherever you are, or however you are watching. And talking of however you can watch, one great place to find us is if you go to YouTube and in the search box you type in Unprecedented TV, as you can see there in the top corner. And that's where you can find Tim Scott Uncancelled and some of the other great shows that we have here on Unprecedented TV. And if you can give us a cheeky follow or a subscribe, that would be so much the better. So, yeah, thanks for joining and good to have you with us and have your company. So the program goes on, and the format, as ever, is you get a few comments from me first, and then we have a guest, and I'm really excited about our guest. Actually, we have great guests, but today we have all the way from Sydney, Australia. He'll be joining us in a few minutes' time. Jammal, political commentator and head of Turning Point Australia. He's got up suitably early in the morning to come on Tim Scott Uncancelled. So we're really looking forward to hearing from him. Okay, so a few comments from me first about what's going on here. What a week it's been with Peter Mandelson. Peter Mandelson scandal. Is this really going to be the end of Keir Starmer? I think it may well be. We want to also hear about Australia's Labour Prime Minister Albanese as well from Joel. And something that's really come to the fore this week is the prospects of pubs. What's happening with pubs? Pubs are really important, and they're a sort of an almost uniquely British kind of thing, pubs. And here's a Wetherspoons. That's a big chain that we have here. More about them in a second. Pubs are really important. You know, they're much more than just places where you can get a pint of beer. They're social centers, they're employment centers, and they give a lot of people their first job, those entry level jobs that set people on a lifetime of purpose and useful work. So Wetherspoons is a really interesting example of a chain of pubs, and in fact we've got a Wetherspoons near us here in southeast England, and I was there this morning having their all-day breakfast with as many cups of tea and coffee as you like. And I was reflecting on that. And yeah, it was pretty much like that. That's not the actual breakfast, but it was pretty much like that. And it's a very successful chain of pubs. And the boss is a guy called Tim Martin. Tim Martin's a very interesting character. He was a early supporter of Brexit. And there he is, Tim Martin, in one of his very convivial establishments. And there was a very interesting article on him, or an interview with him, in the Sunday Times recently, saying that because of the lockdowns and the damage that the lockdowns did, I want to ask Joel similarly, how much damage did the lockdowns do in Australia? They've had to cut back from 900 establishments to about 750. But he reckons that each pub generates about £1 million a year in tax revenue. That's employers' NI, national insurance, VAT, business rates, beer duty, all that sort of good stuff. So pubs are really, really important social centres. And he is also one of Britain's top taxpayers. In the same article in the Sunday Times, as well as having the Sunday Times Rich List, which comes out in about May, which is really interesting. They also come out here with our top 100 taxpayers. And you can see Tim Martin there, Sir Tim Martin, sorry, selling him short. He was Britain's 8th largest taxpayer. You can see there his chain, JD Wetherspoons. And he paid, you can see on the right there, he paid 200 million in tax. And you've also got our top taxpayers paying 400 million in tax. Who says the rich don't pay their tax? And there's also loads of singers and footballers paying a lot of tax, and J.K. Rowling paying 50 million a year. So don't let anybody tell you that the rich don't pay their tax. Okay, so that's the importance of pubs and the importance of tax revenue from pubs and the importance of our top taxpayers. But enough from me, because we want to meet our guest, Joel Jammal from Australia, coming up, and he's got up very early this morning. Joel, good morning where you are, and welcome to Tim Scott Uncancelled.
Good evening, Tim. I really appreciate you staying up late for me. Thank you so much. It's an awkward time zone.
You've got up early. So what time is it in Sydney?
Oh, look, at the moment it's 8:15 a.m., but I'm usually up at 4:30 a.m. anyway, so
My goodness,
I don't mind.
4:30. Wow, that's impressive. Good stuff. Well, Joel, it's great to have you with us. Now, we first met at CPAC, Conservative Political Action Center in Washington, D.C., didn't we? And actually, by coincidence, or maybe a higher purpose, we ended up sitting next to each other at the dinner, I seem to remember.
That's right. Washington, D.C., early last year. It was a lot of fun to meet so many different people. And obviously, having the Five Eyes countries members rock up there to actually share our experiences and what we perhaps the challenges that we face in our respective countries. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. So just tell us a little bit about what you do, Joel, and where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the head of Turning Point Australia. I'm also the head of the Light Australia newspaper. And I also have the ARC podcast here as well. So every year we reach about 220 million views online. We just recently crossed the 1 billion view mark in October last year. We've been around for about 4 or 5 years. And what I'm basically do for the Australian people ever since the COVID lockdowns is I teach people who's punching them, why they're punching them, and how they can punch back politically. One of the big issues I often find, Tim, and we've often talked about is, there's a great line in the Bible, my people suffer because of their lack of knowledge. I'm finding that a lot of people are realizing that they weren't taught proper civics classes in school. They don't know how to breathe their values into politics. And look, as an unashamed Christian and conservative, I'm the sort of guy that I'm not afraid to actually share my values. I'm not afraid to speak those values. And I think we need more of that. And also showing people how to breathe that into politics so that they can get representatives that represent them.
Very interesting, Joel. Where there is no vision, the people perish. I think those are things that we're both familiar with. Okay, good stuff. So I think, Joel, you've recently had Australia Day, haven't you?
That's right. Yeah.
How's Australia Day been going?
Yeah, it was a huge success this year. You know, it was one of the most recent Australia Days that I've actually remember being a significant one for the last 5 years. We had enormous protests in the street. We had festivals. We had people draping themselves in the Australian flag. People were putting Australian flags all over bridges, a bit like in the UK, how you guys had the basically hoist the colours movement. We've been having that in Australia as well, and it's been a big 4-month lead up to January 26th. But we have actually deemed January Australia Month. So we wanted to have a whole month to celebrate Australia and everything that we're proud of as a country.
Well, Joel, as I think you know, I was born in Australia in a little mining town on Tasmania called Queenstown. Okay, but also I'm aware, so I have a great fondness for Australia, and I'm very interested in this whole Kanzuk thing and some of the parallels between Britain and Australia that we can talk about. And it was great to have lunch with you when you were over in London recently. But also, Joel, not everybody appreciates Australia Day, do they?
No, we have these Invasion Day protests, which I'm a bit perplexed by because we're in the middle of an invasion with mass immigration in Australia. They don't protest against that, but they protest against the Invasion Day. You know, Australia's Aboriginal, the sovereignty was never ceded. A lot of people, they don't realize that Australia was actually conquered. These people were adopted into the Constitution. They're no longer a part of like a sovereign tribe anymore. They've been adopted into Australia and they've become a part of our history as a result. But no, look, every year this happens. You get the usual suspects that come out. Anyone, any Tom, Dick and Harry that hates Australia has a gripe with Australia, wants to tear Australia down. The communists, the Marxists, the most radical of Islamists, they all come out on that day in particular to come out and basically they wear the Aboriginal flag, they drape themselves in it as a cover, but be under no illusions. There are many Aboriginal Australians that actually are proud of this country. They look back at our history. It is what it is. But look, that's just like anyone over a country that's 300 years old. There's going to be good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. Now, Joel, you've got Middle Eastern heritage yourself, haven't you?
That's right. Yeah, I come from a long line of Middle Eastern Christians. On my mum's side, she was a Lebanese Maronite Catholic, and my dad was a Syrian Orthodox Christian. And my grandfather came to Australia in the late 60s, and we've never looked back since.
Yeah, good stuff. So you've really embraced what Australia has to offer.
That's right. Yeah, I went to the King's School in Sydney, so I have quite an affinity with British culture and British military culture, especially.
Yeah.
It has the oldest. It's actually connected to the King's College in the UK.
Yeah.
And I was a proud cadet under officer in the cadet corps there, which is the sword behind me, which we used to march with.
Good stuff.
And
you might see the statue here.
Yeah, I could see that. I saw that before. Yeah, I love it. I think it's critical for any young man in today's day and age to understand the strength of their arms, to understand the strength of their body, to actually have that military discipline instilled into them, and to actually work out how to lead their peers in a way that is becoming of a leader. So I really enjoyed my schooling.
Good stuff. Joel, let me just jump ahead a bit, because I wanted to get this bit in, seeing as we're briefly dwelling on military matters. I noticed recently you were talking about Australia as a military ally of the USA. And of course, you guys sent troops to Vietnam, a conflict we stayed out of, probably rightly, actually, but I think you guys did the right thing. And my wife and I, we had a fantastic holiday to Southern Africa, and we were on holiday in Botswana. And it was my absolute privilege to meet a 78-year-old Australian, Major Stuart Penny, retired, of course, at 78. And not only had he served in Vietnam, he had been a young lieutenant and platoon commander in Vietnam, but his unit, 6 RAR, 6th Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, was the unit at the Battle of Long Tan in 1966. And he was quite involved in that, and one of their subunits, out of 90 men, they had 20 killed and 20 wounded. And if anyone's interested in that, there's a fantastic film called, relatively recent film. You'll also find the Battle of Long Tan on YouTube, and there's a fantastic, relatively recent film called Danger Close, which relates to some of the artillery strikes that they had to call in to stop themselves being overrun. Anyway, it was an absolute privilege to meet Stuart Penny, Joel, and a reminder of the Anzac forces that, you know, and there were New Zealand troops there as well in their camp, and a great reminder of the contribution of the Anzacs over the years. Yeah.
No, look, for better or worse, when it comes to what's going on with the American and Australian alliance, it does go back to the Battle of Coral Sea. A lot of Australians, they did fight for the UK, for the motherland. They did fight to try and preserve the motherland. And when it came to what happened with the middle of World War II, Japan ended up basically being a significant threat to Australia, to the point that we were really worried about being invaded. Things got so dire, we drew a whole line across Australia to basically give the northern half to the Japanese in a surrender. But no, the Battle of the Coral Sea was a real turning point for the country with regards to the U.S. general who's was it MacArthur, whose name escapes me, essentially, that he was in the Pacific, and this basically really was a pivot in Australian foreign policy, where we really did start to talk about how we could be closer to America. Yeah. And ever since, you know, for better or worse, Australia has been in every war with the Americans side by side, for better or worse. And we've been fighting and shared blood, sweat, and tears together. And so, look, it is a long-standing tradition. I have a controversial opinion, which is that Australia is actually the US's greatest ally, because we have gone into each of these wars together, and that's honored throughout culture, throughout movies, throughout even video games like Halo and the sort. And I just think that it's a very special relationship. And so, look, I think the Five Eyes countries need to lean into that more. We do have a shared ethos.
Yeah, the Five Eyes being UK, USA, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. Of course.
We can't forget the Canadians, even though they've got a funny prime minister.
I know, and another one.
Another one.
So I'm very into this whole Kanzuk thing, and I'm a huge fan of Tony Abbott. In fact, I had the privilege of meeting him over here in London last year. Let's not forget, final point on this. Let's not forget your northern city of Darwin during the war was bombed by the Japanese, and it's in that film Australia, starring, trying to remember, Darwin was bombed several times by the Japanese. So mainland Australia was bombed in World War II.
That's right. Yeah, it was a pretty. It was the only attack that really reached Australia, other than a lone Japanese submarine making it into Sydney Harbour.
Oh, wow.
But yes, I do believe a submarine. There's not many, so it's easy to keep track of the attacks. But there was one submarine that made it through. Yeah. I think it was a single manned submarine, and it ended up sinking a ferry in Sydney Harbour.
Oh,
but
wow.
but no, Darwin was a lot more damage, a lot more casualties.
Yeah, it was. It was. Okay, so I want to move on then, Joel. Thank you. And just look at some of the issues, and I'm very interested in some of the comparisons between the UK and Australia, because actually we share so much. And you had a really terrible incident a couple of years ago, where there was a big pro-Palestinian demonstration by Sydney Opera House with people reportedly chanting "Gas the Jews," and of course people are now saying, "Oh no, they never said that." And then, of course, just before Christmas, we had, here we go. There was that. I mean, what's your view on that one? It seems this was a couple of years ago, wasn't it? At the start of the Gaza war with Israel and Gaza. It seems pretty clear to me these pro-Palestinian demonstrators were chanting "Gas the Jews," but now you've got people saying, "Oh, they weren't really saying that."
Yeah, look, I remember this vividly. So this was the night of the attack. So in Australia, when the attack happened, we were going into the evening, whereas obviously with a different time zone in the US and in the UK. So before Israel had even responded, there were these protests in the street. You had these Islamic sheikhs who are still in this country, these Islamic preachers. None of them have been deported or put in jail. They were out there, saying, "I'm elated." That's a direct quote. They'd be in the street. This is a day of victory. And look, anyone that wants to celebrate the slaughtering of innocents has no place in Australian society. And this footage outside the Sydney Opera House was that night where it was like a snap protest. And the Premier of New South Wales, he projected onto the Opera House the Israel flag. He was warned by the federal police, if you do this, this will be a problem. So they were warned against it by the police, by the federal Labor government, who no one actually knows this. This is actually breaking news. But also in the footage that came out when they were out there, it was taken by David Adler, who was the head of the Australian Jewish Association. He's actually a friend. And yes, what you can appear to see is people saying "Gas the Jews." However, when I've asked people that were at that protest, there are a number of, believe it or not, government employees that were at that protest, but there were also other people in the Muslim community that I spoke to. One girl I spoke to that knew people there was Syrian girl. She was saying they weren't saying "Gas the Jews," they were saying "Where's the Jews?" Because now look, guys, this is disputed. I don't know. The police have come out and said, look, they were saying "Where's the Jews," not "Gas the Jews." I don't know what the truth is. It sounds like "Gas the Jews," but when I pushed back on Syrian guy, I said, but I don't understand. What do you mean? They weren't saying "Gas the Jews," they were saying "Where's the Jews?" And she was saying, well, what happened was the police tried to shut down these protesters when they arrived at the Opera House. So they said to the protesters, the police said to the protesters, those with the mics, "You can't do this because you're basically scaring off Jewish people. You're not making them feel welcome," which then prompted the chant, "Where are the Jews?" They're like, there are no Jews here, basically. Who are we keeping away? But look, this is not good stuff for Australia. Most average Australians look at this and they're just perplexed. This is a conflict that's 14,000 kilometers away. Yeah. We're not the police of the world. We're very relaxed. My grandfather, my parents, when they came to this country, they left their bag of old gripes where they came from. They adopted the Australian set of values. We celebrate Australia. We're adopted into this country. I'm an adopted Australian son, and we respect the host. But the idea that we're going to import our foreign conflicts, if everyone did that, we wouldn't have time to actually make Australia great again. And so I have a very simple philosophy, and most Australians agree with this, which is leave those conflicts overseas. We don't want to see you celebrating the death of innocents overseas. And we've got to focus on Australia.
Similar problems here. We have similar problems here, Joel. We have overseas conflicts being played out on the streets of London and other cities. And final comment on this, because we must move on, is that people can look this up. Just go to YouTube and look it up and just, take your own view on what was said. It does appear to be disputed. It sounded to me like "gas the Jews," although I don't want to be unfair.
I thought so. Look, I thought so too. I thought so too, but
so
I don't know. Yeah, but again,
our word for it. Just look it up and listen, people. And there were the same here. There were people outside the Israeli embassy in London that the night that Hamas attacked into Israel hadn't even done anything, and there were people out in the streets, frankly celebrating. But look, let's move on, and I want to talk about the Bondi massacre now. Before Christmas, Joel. Now you said on your Twitter account that you said the anger over it is palpable in Australia. But what did you mean by that?
Yeah, so look, the Australian people feel that they have been essentially clamped down on the last 5 years with you can't move without the government knowing about it. They have all your data. They have existing legislation. You can't get a gun. We have very good gun laws in this country already. We've had them for 30 years unchanged. The idea that this man and his father were on ACO watch lists, our CIA was watch list, our intelligence agencies, and the idea that they were actually allowed to purchase a gun even though they knew that they had associations with ISIS for a number of years now. Consecutive governments in New South Wales, in my state, rejected under the Liberal Party, the Conservative Party in Australia. They rejected the father's request for a gun multiple times. But the moment the Labor government came in under Chris Minns in 2023, they approved a gun to them. These men were traveling to the Philippines. They may have been receiving training from ISIS camps. We don't know. And the investigation's still ongoing. The idea now that the government's passing more laws, which, by the way, wouldn't prevent the shooting. They said, you can't purchase more than 10 guns. These guys had 5 guns. So that's under that threshold. The idea that the surveillance state didn't work, it's like, well, why am I giving up my freedom then? It's just going to be the law-abiding citizens that follow these laws. And so I get very frustrated when I look at what's happened. And the anger is palpable because for a number of years now, a little over 2.5 years now, we've witnessed the fact that the government has been turning a blind eye to its own electorates that are heavily Islamic, especially in Western Sydney and Western Melbourne. And there are radical Islamists in these countries, in these electorates, that are basically pushing the discussion in a way that is making things worse in this country. Now, look, this isn't an anti-Muslim thing. You just can't celebrate, you can't talk about in your sermons, and legitimize political acts of violence. You just can't do it. That is terrorism. You should be deported. And if you're an Australian citizen, you should be locked up. You're not allowed to do that because that is not the Australian way of life. That's not normal. And look, we threaten the stability of our society if we don't clamp down on this. And so the idea that the government didn't use the existing laws in the books, that is why the anger is palpable. That is why Anthony Albanese has been heckled every time he goes to one of these vigils. He doesn't show his face at these funerals. And so, no, look, the Prime Minister is really facing a big backlash. And I think that's why the polls look the way that they do. And our Conservative Party is doing no better. They're getting smashed by Senator Pauline Hanson, who, similar to Nigel Farage, is rocking it in the polls. And, the Conservative Party face a extinction right now. And so Senator Hanson has been doing a very good job in articulating this. Everyone knows where she stands on immigration. This man's father, Naveed, you can see in that photo, His father came on a student visa in the late 90s and essentially was allowed to get a gun even though his son was on ISIS watch lists. I mean, on ACO watch lists associated with ISIS. So, look, there's significant problems with this. And over the last 2 years, I've witnessed the government cancel visas of a number of right-wing speakers like Posey Parker from the UK, like Jordan Peterson, like Novak Djokovic, like a number of Israeli ministers coming to Australia, like Candace Owens. They only cancelled her visa last year. It's like, well, you mean to tell me you've been more focused on that and Nazis, supposed Nazis and right-wing extremists, but you couldn't go after these Islamic extremists? Maybe it's because you've got heavily Muslim areas that won't let you actually do this sort of stuff. And again, we haven't had one Islamic preacher on a visa deported or locked up, not one, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The parallels, Joel, between Britain and the UK. You know, we've both got an unpopular Labour government. Starmer here seems to be out. I think it's only a matter of time before he goes. And both countries have got what, let's call them, a radical right party. Reform under Nigel Farage and One Nation under Pauline Hanson. I mean, One Nation. Let's talk about One Nation. I mean, because they're a sort of radical. Would you call them a radical right party?
Oh, look, I wouldn't say they're far right. I'd say there's much further right parties, but I think that Senator Hanson is becoming a lot more mainstream, and that bears it out in the polls. I mean, recent polls, just to give you a bit of an update on the latest statistics, the Labour Party is basically on about 31% of the vote, which is a bit like the UK, and then the Conservative Party, coalition, Liberal and National, they're about maybe 20% right now, whereas One Nation is at about 24% they're polling at, which is more than the Conservative Party in this country. And so this is a significant shakeup, similar to the UK. We're a little bit behind you guys. We are still building a lot of our infrastructure, and Senator Hanson, a bit like Nigel Farage, only has a beachhead in government, but there are ministers that are defecting to her from the Conservative Party, members that have a good track record.
Yeah, same here. Okay, they have got parliamentary representation, haven't they?
Absolutely. They've got at a state and federal level, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very interesting. I also wanted to ask you about the voice referendum. Now, just for people who haven't heard about that, I mean, we had the Brexit referendum here. These and both those referendums, the Brexit referendum here in 2016, the voice referendum. Tell us a little bit about it in a second. That you guys had a couple of years ago. Neither of those referenda went the way that elites wanted them to go, which was glorious. Just briefly tell us a little bit about the voice referendum and how that went for people who maybe haven't heard of it.
Sure. So generally speaking, this was basically to add almost like a new high court to Australia, a consultative body that was supposedly to speak up on Aboriginal issues. Now, the problem with this particular issue, this was about closing the gap between Aboriginal people and average Australians. The problem with this issue is even the Black sovereignty movement didn't want this. A lot of Indigenous people didn't want this. And the reason for that is, and a lot of Australians rejected this, 60 to 70% of them rejected this, because there was no detail. We didn't know who was going to make up this particular body. We didn't know how they were going to be elected. We didn't know what powers they would have. All of this detail, this blank check, would be filled in after it was signed, basically. And it was a completely dangerous proposal. I'm glad that the no vote ended up triumphing. It was 100% a populist moment for Australia, very similar to the UK. And because we have mandatory voting, it was a larger margin than what you guys had in the UK. You guys had about 51.5% voted against, basically, you voted to leave the European Union. Whereas in Australia, it was 60 to 70% of our country voted to actually reject the voice to the parliament. And so all the big banks, all the unions, all the media, even, Coles and Woolworths, the biggest corporations, they all donated about $100 million to this thing. On top of that, the Electoral Commission in Australia, basically put $250 million towards education campaigns and running this referendum as well, which was definitely lopsided in educating the public. It was a completely substandard. Whereas the no side to this proposal, as the underdogs, it was a truly David versus Goliath situation. We had about $20 million in total. And so it was an enormous triumph. It was a victory for the little people, as Nigel Farage would say, and he donned it as Australia's Brexit moment. And it was just a very great breath of fresh air, because in the past we've had the same-sex marriage proposals and votes and whatever, and we've lost those because of the manner in which those were conducted and framed. It was just great to see that the entire nation, every state, rejected this proposal, and the Northern Territory rejected this proposal, which is where a lot of Aboriginal people live.
I'll bet you Canberra voted for it.
They did. They were the only place to vote for it, the Australian Capital Territory.
Everyone who works for everyone who's on the government payroll, of course.
Well, I'll tell you what, Tim, just so you know, anywhere from $8 billion to $40 billion every year, which is almost the size of our defense budget, goes towards trying to close this gap between Aboriginal Australians and average Australians. Where does that money go? One of the reasons why so many Aboriginal people voted against this proposal is the fact that they actually didn't like that they were ceding their sovereignty, because you need to understand, there's 300 different tribes. They didn't want one voice. They liked having their own voice, like a democracy. And the other thing is they're just asking the question, where is the $40 billion going? It's going to consultants. It's going to planners. It's going to lawyers in Canberra. It's not going to people that actually need it in rural Australia, in these communities. And so there's been an enormous call for accountability and audit of this money, rather than giving the government more power.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, it was a great moment, and a bit like the Brexit referendum here. Okay, we're just going to take a short break whilst we find out more about some of the great shows that you can get here on Unprecedented TV. Okay, thank you. That's Dire Consequences with Claire Dyer here on Unprecedented TV. Joel, just a quick comment from you on Charlie Kirk. I know you didn't meet him face to face, but you were on a call or two with him, and you were trying to get him to come over to Australia. Do you just want to give us a quick comment on Charlie and his murder?
Yeah, look, I think it's a reminder that life is precious. It's that, any moment could end any time. So hold your family close. But we are entering enormously dangerous times. When it comes to Charlie and his work, it was phenomenal. It was the fact that he could engage in respectful debate. You could genuinely say when he chatted with someone, he wanted the best for them and hold their hand to win the debate fair and square. And so I really did. He was a true lover of the battle of ideas, and he's sorely missed. We were really very much hoping to bring him out to Australia. And look, we're focused on making sure that we can continue his legacy in Australia, because he was a true believer in the Turning Point brand being an international brand that actually helped people breathe their values into politics. And so, look, Charlie's very much missed. In particular, this week, I've been missing him a lot. Yeah. Especially with the Epstein files coming out. He was very outspoken on government accountability. He was very outspoken on the fact that Epstein was working for intelligence agencies. He was working for Mossad, despite the fact the media has been trying to say that, he was a Russian asset or this or that. This was a bad guy, and Charlie, showing his character, demonstrated that, look, Epstein was not a good guy. And anyone that's out there, whether you're a Zionist or you're a non-Zionist, you need to call this man out, because he had fingers in every government, and he was someone that was a wheeler and dealer in blackmail material, and he needs to be condemned.
Yeah, he was certainly a very powerful, very influential guy. He knew all sorts of people, and I'm sure he had all sorts of compromising material on people. There he is with President Trump. Okay, so just a few minutes left, and with Joel Jammal from Turning Point Australia coming to us from Sydney. Okay, so Joel, Australia's still a monarchy, isn't it? And
that's right.
Charles III is head of state. And I gather you've had a new coin come out in Australia with the Queen on it. And when I say Queen, I do, of course, mean Elizabeth, not Camilla. There'll only be one Queen in my book, and that's the wonderful Elizabeth II. I mean, that coin, just looking at her, oh dear. I mean, she looks like Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, what have they done to her?
Look, don't get me started. I don't know what they're trying to do. They could have made it look a bit more graceful. She reached her diamond jubilee, I do believe, or later, and I think that she lived an enormously fruitful life. I don't know why they're celebrating her in this manner.
Yeah, fair. Okay, fair enough. Probably the less said about that coin, the better, really. But
indeed,
you guys did have a referendum, didn't you, on becoming a republic? But wasn't there something in the small print that the new head of state would only be chosen by the parliament and not it wouldn't be voted for by the public?
Look, our last referendum before The Voice was on whether we should become a republic. There you go, Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yes.
No, look, most people love the Queen in Australia. Yeah. They loved her when she was around. There was a real endearment for her.
Yeah, I think so. But what do you think? I mean, Charles over the years has visited Australia quite a bit. Has he been since he was king?
Look, Charles is probably loved a little less, to be honest. I'm not sure why, but I just think the Queen had a lot longer to grow on us, and I think she was very graceful. She performed the duties of the office very of the crown very respectfully, and she would never step out of line and talk about really anything. Do you like Nigel Farage? She won't really say anything. Do you agree with the climate proposal? No, she doesn't agree with, she doesn't say anything. Whereas, Charles, he's a lot more political. We know he agrees with the, climate change and net zero and a lot of these World Economic Forum agendas. And unfortunately, I think that turns a lot of people off. But look, I believe Australia is going in the direction of becoming a republic, but the only thing that stops it is the detail. The problem is anyone that puts the proposal up probably has the most to gain. And so that's kind of why in the Voice proposal, they put so little detail, because when they tried to put detail in the 30 years ago in the referendum for a republic, they couldn't agree on, basically what model that would work. And the model that was put forward was a bunk one. And so, look, for now, if it ain't broke, don't fix it is the philosophy of Australians. The real problem is, though, I do think we're going to have to sort this out at some point. As much as I am a monarchist, I do think at some point this is going to have to be sorted out, because all it takes is for Prince Charles to say every country under his tutelage basically has to adopt net zero policies. Overnight, you won't find a monarchist in Australia. Very
interesting. And I think just thinking about your Prime Minister Albanese, is it? How do you pronounce? Is it Albanese or Albanese? This is what.
Albanese. It's Italian.
Albanese, yeah. Now we know he had previous form as a pro-Palestinian activist, but is he a Republican as well? Do you think is Labour more likely to push Australia towards becoming a republic?
100%, 100%. Yeah. It was very much spearheaded on the left, the Labour Party in the last referendum, as well as the Voice referendum. But yeah, the same thing goes for the Wets or the Rhinos in the Conservative Party. A lot of them were Malcolm Turnbull, for example. He's the former Prime Minister of Australia. He was a more left-wing Prime Minister from the Conservative Party. He was debating Tony Abbott, a more right-wing member of the Conservative Party. And so, look, it was very much he was definitely was a. I don't think he was a monarchist at all.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned Tony Abbott again. A great Aussie, great Anglophile, Christian man, and actually one of my political heroes. And obviously, you have some respect for him as well. Yeah, good stuff. Okay.
Sorry, Tim. I just remembered one thing, which was that the Prime Minister, when he came in, one of the big indicators that he's not a monarchist was he created a whole new position basically to break up and separate from the monarchy. The name escapes me, but he created a new sort of minister in charge of that, which kind of told you exactly what you needed to know with regards to the direction he wanted to send us culturally.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. Okay, Joel, it's been great to have you on. Just remind people, where can they find you? You're on Twitter X, aren't you, for example?
That's right. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, TikTok, everywhere. If you search Joel Jammal, as it's spelt below my face, or you search Turning Point Australia, we've got 600,000 followers online. We really enjoy doing podcasts every week, getting the stories out about Australia every week and featuring many professionals. So if you want to head there, or if you want to connect with us on our website, that's tpaust.com.au. We really appreciate you guys tuning in and really supporting us. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again in person, hopefully soon, Tim. I may be making a trip to the UK again very soon.
That'd be great. I am going to come to Australia. I may come for CPAC Australia and give Andrew Cooper my regards. He's the organizer, isn't he? The sort of.
That's right. Andrew and I, we're heading to CPAC in Texas in March, actually, late March. There's a big Aussie contingent going this year. Last year it was more 25 people. Yeah, this year it's going to be 50 people going. So there's a lot of young people. They've doubled or quadrupled the amount of young people going that they're sponsoring. And CPAC in Australia, we're very close with us at Turning Point. We're very close with CPAC. They sent me over last time, and it was a lot of fun. And that's kind of the reason why I did another 5 trips last year to the USA. I really enjoyed it. Americans just on the same page with liberty.
Fantastic. Good stuff. Okay, I'll see you soon, Joel. All the best to you. That's Joel Jammal there from Turning Point Australia, joining us early in the morning from Sydney, Australia. So, folks, we hope you've enjoyed this show. We certainly had a lot to talk about and a lot to go through. Great to have Joel on with us. And thank you for bearing with, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Tim Scott Uncancelled with me, Tim Scott.